We're going to continue our reading. We're going to try to read through the book of Isaiah on our Wednesday nights, and so try some different things to do that. So follow along on the wall as we read. For behold, the Lord God of hosts is taking away from Jerusalem and from Judah support and supply, all support of bread and all support of water, the mighty man and the soldier, the judge and the prophet, the diviner and the elder, the captain of 50 and the man of rank, the counselor and the skillful magician and the expert in charms. I will make boys their princes, and infants shall rule over them. And the people will oppress one another, everyone his fellow and everyone his neighbor. Youth will be insolent to the elder, and the despised to the honorable. For a man will take hold of his brother in the house of his father, saying, You have a cloak, you shall be our leader. And this heap of ruin shall be under your rule. In that day he will speak out, saying, I will not be a healer. In my house there is neither bread nor cloak. You shall not make me the leader of the people. For Jerusalem has stumbled, and Judah has fallen, because their speech and their deeds are against the Lord, defying his glorious presence. For look on their faces bears witness against them. They proclaim their sin like Sodom. They do not hide it. Woe to them, for they have brought evil upon themselves. Tell the righteous that it shall be well with them, for they shall eat the fruit of their deeds. Woe to the wicked, it shall be ill with them, for what his hands have dealt out shall be done to him. My people, infants, are their oppressors, and women shall rule over them. O my people, your guides mislead you, and you have swallowed up the course of your paths. The Lord has taken his place to contend. He stands to judge peoples. The Lord will enter into judgment with the elders and princes of his people. It is you who have devoured the vineyard. The spoil of the poor is in your houses. What do you mean by crushing my people, by grinding the face of the poor, declares the Lord God of hosts. The Lord said, because the daughters of Zion are haughty and walk with outstretched necks, glancing wantonly with their eyes, mincing along as they go, tinkling with their feet. Therefore the Lord will strike with a scab the heads of the daughters of Zion, and the Lord will lay bare their secret parts. In that day the Lord will take away the finery of the anklets, the headbands, the crescents, the pendants, the bracelets, and the scarves, and the headdresses, and the armlets, and the sashes, and the perfume boxes, and the amulets, the signet rings, and the nose rings, and festal robes, and mantles, the cloaks, and the handbags, and the mirrors, and the linen garments, the turbans, and the veils. Instead of perfume, there will be rottenness, and instead of a belt, a rope, and instead of a well-set hair, baldness. Instead of a rich robe, a skirt of sackcloth, and branding instead of beauty. Your men shall fall by the sword, and your mighty men in battle, and her gates shall lament and mourn. Empty she shall sit on the ground. Chapter 4, and 7 women shall take hold of one man in that day, saying, we will eat our own bread and wear our own clothes. Only let us be called by your name. Take away our reproach. In that day, the branch of the Lord shall be beautiful and glorious, and the fruit of the land shall be the pride and honor of the survivors of Israel. And he who is left in Zion and remains in Jerusalem will be called holy. Everyone who has been recorded for life in Jerusalem, when the Lord shall have washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion and cleansed the bloodstains of Jerusalem from its midst by a spirit of judgment and by a spirit of burning. The Lord will create over the whole site of Mount Zion and over her assemblies a cloud by day and a smoke and the shining of a flaming fire by night. For over all the glory there will be a canopy. There will be a booth for shade by day from the heat, and for a refuge and a shelter from the storm and rain. Just reading that text answers this question, or answers this statement. God chose to reveal himself through time and space and relationships, or you might call it history. God has revealed himself through the template of the history of mankind, and you cannot understand the book of Isaiah unless you understand it in context of its history. You can't understand Isaiah unless you understand its time, its geographical space, and the relationships that the people had with God. So I know you might be sitting there saying, it's going to be boring. We got to talk about history. I hated history in high school. Well, you got to have it. You got to have history of Isaiah in order to understand Isaiah. A lot of what we just read probably went right by a lot of us, unless you understand the time and place and events of Isaiah. So we're going to take about 40 minutes tonight and run through some history, about 350 years of history, so that everybody can go back and watch it on YouTube later and get the information about the history of the life and time of Isaiah. Israel and Judah and the life of Isaiah centers around the Fertile Crescent. The Fertile Crescent is fed from snow-covered mountains in southeastern Turkey and northern Syria. Those mountains drain into rivers which flow two directions, one way down the coast of what is called the Levant or Israel, the other way down into what we call Iraq and Iran. And that's fierce and horrible desert, but down in the valleys where the rivers are, it's very lush and very green. This was the cradle of civilization, and this is where this story takes place. And the nations that dominated this area are the nations that you'll hear about and think about when you study Isaiah. The first nation, of course, is the nation of Israel and Judah. We know, if you read the Bible much at all, you know that story. So, the judges came along, and then King Saul and King David and King Solomon built the dynasty and the monarchies that they built, and they were at the end of Solomon's reign a powerful kingdom. And of course it divided. We're not going to cover the story of the division of the nation of Israel, but we're going to pick up as two divided countries, a country of Israel and a country of Judah. The Israeli people escaped from bondage from Egypt. That will be another world power that's going to come into play as we study through the book of Isaiah. Egypt, the nation that Israel escaped from, a very powerful nation in these years. Also the nation of Assyria. Don't confuse Assyria with Syria. Assyria was a world power, a large country. Syria, when you read Syria, starts with an S, in Isaiah and in the book of Kings and the book of Chronicles, it was a relatively small nation that was immediately adjacent to the northern kingdom of Israel, and it was important, but it wasn't as big and powerful as the nation of Assyria. So let's kind of get that lined out as we go. Another nation that we'll study as we study the book of Isaiah these next 30 Wednesday nights is the nation of Babylon. You equate with Babylon, you might think of Nebuchadnezzar and the image that he stood up, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and those stories you read from the book of Daniel. And then, of course, finally, the last nation that will come to play near the end of our history tonight are the Medes and the Persians. Now, if you wanted to connect these to today's nations, the Medes and the Persians are roughly equal to the people in Iran, roughly. The Babylonian people are roughly equal to the people in Iraq. The Assyrian people are roughly equal to the Kurds and the Armenians. They are no longer a nation. They are dispersed among the Kurdish people, which live in northern Iran, and the Armenian people, which live in Armenia. The Egyptian people are the Egyptian people that we've always known, and of course the Israeli people are the Israeli people. And so that's kind of who these people are today. These are going to be the world powers that are going to come up over and over again as we study through the book of Isaiah. We're going to pick up the history at about 853 BC. Now, this counter works backwards. You know, it's 2026 right now. Next year it'll be 2027. You add 1 year. Well, these you subtract years because we're working down to zero. So we're starting back up from Christ, back up 853 years. The nation of Israel is divided. There's the northern kingdom, 10 tribes of Israel, and the southern kingdom of Judah. The northern kingdom of Israel is led by the king Ahab and his evil wife Jezebel. If you've studied the Bible much, you've studied their story. And while the Bible paints them out as very sinful, and they were very sinful, they were also very successful. It was a very powerful empire. It was very wealthy. They had imports from a lot of countries. It was quite a powerful nation, the northern country of Israel was. On the other hand, the nation of Judah was made up of the tribe of Judah and some from Benjamin. It was almost irrelevant on the world stage. And that's a very important distinction that we're going to draw a circle around that tonight as we think about Isaiah. Isaiah was a prophet that serviced or worked under the king of Judah, the small country in the south. That's where he lived and what he had to say. And of course, he talked about all these other kingdoms, but that's kind of where he lives. When you think about Isaiah, has to do with Judah, the southern country, and on the world stage, an almost irrelevant nation. And then, of course, the nation of Israel, the northern tribes, these 10 tribes, very large and powerful. All right, We're going to walk through a timeline. This is the span of history we're going to cover. We're going to begin at about 853 BC, and tonight we will finish at about 538 BC. And no, I'm not dyslexic. Those are the dates that we'll start and end with. At the top of this timeline, you'll notice that the Egyptian nation had been a very powerful nation, but it was beginning to fade. And I show that there. It's sort of fading. It doesn't go away, but it's beginning to fade. And the Assyrian kingdom begins to come into view. The Assyrian kingdom is Nineveh. That's the country that Jonah went to and preached. Somebody preached about Jonah here lately. The Assyrian Empire maintained being a very powerful nation, and along about 600 or so BC, it began to fall, and the nation of Babylon took its place as being the dominant world force. There was a little window there that Egypt came back to some relevance at that time. And then when the Babylonian Empire fell, the Persian Empire took its place, and that's at the end of this timeline. You'll notice I have the kingdoms across the top. The black boxes represent some of the major historical events we will talk about tonight, and these are in the Bible. The Battle of Karkar, the fall of the nation of Israel, the siege of Jerusalem that Jonathan talked about last Wednesday night, the Josiah falling, the Battle of Carchemish, the fall of Jerusalem to Babylon, and finally the return of the exiles. Beneath that, those blue boxes represent not all of, but the lengthier kings of the northern tribes of Israel. Jehu, Jehoash, Jeroboam, Hoshea, there were some others in there too, but those are the ones. And it ended in 722 BC. It was destroyed. Those green boxes represent the kings of Judah, the small kingdom to the south. You might recognize some of the abbreviations there. I have Hezekiah, for example, or Josiah. And so those are the kings that reigned over Judah. And of course, it ceased to be a kingdom in 586. Beneath that, the magenta lines represent roughly placed the prophets. The oldest one is Amos. And I know there's some debate about this, but this is generally accepted what they are. Amos was one of the oldest, served the northern 10 tribes. Isaiah, right in the middle of this history, you see Isaiah, he served Judah. Micaiah also. Jonah was of the northern tribes, went into Nineveh, and then Hosea was of the northern tribe. And then, of course, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, and Jeremiah. And there are a lot of the prophets you could put if you went further to the right. So this is roughly the story we're going to tell tonight. This story has to do with Isaiah, because we're going to spend the next 30 or so Wednesday nights talking about Isaiah. And you could tell from what we just read, it's a hard book. You read all that, it can really confuse you, and you get mumbled up into all the language. Understanding the story helps a lot. Let me give you the big picture right here. Israel and Judah were sinful. God punished them and ultimately destroyed them, but left a remnant that could return. And out of the ashes of that return, God is going to bring greatness to the world. Not just the restoration of the nation of Israel, but greatness to the world. That's Isaiah's story. That's what Isaiah is telling. Okay, we're going to start working through events. We'll start with the first one. Assyria was beginning to grow and become this world power, and it was beginning to threaten the Levant. The Levant is this strip of land along the Mediterranean Sea. Ahab and Jezebel knew that, and they knew that they were going to lose what they had. So Ahab put together a coalition of armies or coalition of governments to help him stand against the Assyrian government. He joined in with the nation of Syria and other nations. But you know who he did not ask? He did not ask Judah to help. And you know why? Because they would have been no help. They were too small and insignificant. He put together a coalition of 5 different nations there, what we would call Lebanon, Syria, some others, the Edomites. And they formed a coalition army, and they went up and they met Shalmaneser III at the Battle of Karkar. And at that battle, they defeated the Assyrians and pushed the Assyrians back for a while. Now, this is just temporary, but this convinced Ahab and the northern kingdom that we can beat these big kingdoms through having coalitions. And this is going to be very important as we go forward, because that's exactly what these kings try to do. They say, okay, we have another kingdom that's troubling us. We're going to form a coalition. Well, what we're going to find out is that didn't really work very well. Nevertheless, that's what happened here. Judah was not involved. This was a successful battle. They defeated, not destroyed, but defeated Assyrians. The Assyrians pulled back. All right. You can read about this and I'm including this so if you want to go back and read up on this later, you can read about this. It's 1 Kings chapter 20, verse 34, 1 Kings chapter 22, verse 1. There is also an archaeological find that says of Ahab from Shalmaneser, in the Kirk monolith, it says that Ahab the Israelite bringing 2,000 chariots and 10,000 soldiers to fight Assyria, describing how powerful Ahab's army was. And if you want to get my notes, I have a lot of other references for other reliable archaeological finds that support this history. What's important about this is Ahab was a powerful king over a powerful northern country of Israel, and they were dominant, and Judah was not. And they pushed back the Assyrians for a brief amount of time. All right, it didn't last. Ahab dies. Jehu, it's spelt Jehu, but I am pretty sure that you would pronounce it Jehu. I wonder if that's where the slang term we use, Jehu, come from. But Jehu decided to restore, at least to some degree, godly worship in the northern country of Israel. And he killed all of Ahab's house, and he restored, not everything, he didn't fix everything, but he restored some things. And he decided it would be better to pay tribute to Assyria to keep them at bay, so they'd leave them. So he began to send taxes to Assyria. And he would pay these taxes to Assyria to keep them at bay. And that worked for a while. And there's an archaeological find, the black obelisk of Shalmaneser III, where it shows, if you can see in that picture, is this the, let me find it. That is Jehu bowing right there before Shalmaneser, paying his taxes. So this is something that history reveals did happen. And he kept the Assyrians at bay for a while. And you can read about this. It's about this time, maybe a little bit after this, that God sends Jonah to Nineveh. And I think Dustin might be the one that's going to talk about this, but I have a thought about that. It won't be long after this that the Assyrians are going to come conquer Israel and take a bunch of captives back to Nineveh. God sends a prophet beforehand to preach to Nineveh that they might repent, and he is successful, which plows the ground to receive God's people so that maybe they can have some success in softening up those people toward the one God of heaven. Nevertheless, it's about this time that Jonah did what he did, maybe slightly after this. All right. Okay. There was a time Assyria, for political reasons, internal reasons, had to withdraw their influence from the northern country. And when they withdrew their influence, the nation of Israel began to try to rebuild a coalition. And they worked to rebuild this coalition and just getting started with it. And the kingdom of Judah got sort of cocky and decided they were going to attack or have this war against Israel. And the king's name was Amaziah. Well, war finally broke out at a city named Beth Shemesh. It's that little explosion I'm showing right there. This is Israel, that's Judah. The war broke out at Beth Shemesh. The nation of Israel so overwhelmingly defeated the Judean army, it was embarrassing. And the Bible tells us about this. If you go over to 2 Kings chapter 14, 2 Chronicles chapter 25, they routed the king. They captured the king. They took him back to Jerusalem. They tore down 600 foot of the northern wall, went into Jerusalem, stole a bunch of gold and treasure out of the temple, and publicly humiliated the Judean people. That's what the northern country of Israel did. And by the way, the excavations at Beth Shemesh show the history of this battle having taken place. It's about this time Isaiah is born. About this time. Now, I say that this is going to really matter when you read Isaiah. Isaiah was born as a prophet and worked as a prophet under a king of a nation that couldn't win anything. They were getting defeated here and there and everywhere. They just didn't have much strength at all. They'd rise a little bit, but not like these other world powers. That's where Isaiah was born. Okay. So we introduce then the prophet Isaiah. Isaiah's life, we know, spans from about 740 BC to about 697 BC. He's probably before that some as a child. He was one of the king's prophets. Let me explain what that means. You remember David had the prophet named Nathan. If you remember, Saul called in prophets of God. They don't name them. Sometimes he talked to Samuel. Other kings had prophets they would consult with. It was normal for kings in this time, and certainly the Judean kings and the Israeli kings had what we might call a staff of advisors. They might have prophets of Yahweh, the God of the Bible. They might also have prophets of Baal and other prophets that worked in their court, and they would ask for advice from these prophets. Isaiah was a prophet to the king, and he served under Uzziah, and then, of course, into Hezekiah, and into those years, and he died right after that. Those are the years of Isaiah. Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, and then Manasseh. He was put to death by Manasseh. The Talmud, and you can look this up if you want, tells that Isaiah, when Manasseh came into power, that Isaiah ran for his life, knowing that Manasseh was going to kill him, and he went and hid inside a cedar tree. There was a hollowed out cedar tree, and he hid inside the cedar tree, and Manasseh had his people go cut the tree down. They sawed it asunder, is how the text reads it, and it's an exact quote of that is used in Hebrews 11:37, suggesting that the Hebrew record is a copy of that historic event, telling us that that was likely Isaiah, that was one of the prophets that was cut in two. He went and hid inside the tree, and Manasseh cut the tree down and cut him in half, and that's how Isaiah died. This is the guy telling us all these great things, living in an irrelevant country, telling us things that are unbelievably spectacular. That's who Isaiah is. So this is the history of Isaiah. If you want to read about Isaiah, of course, the book of Isaiah, you can read about him 2 Kings chapter 19 through chapter 20, Chronicles 26 through 32, multiple New Testament references. There is an archaeological find regarding Uzziah, sometimes pronounced Azariah. It's more or less a headstone. That's this artifact right here. What it says is, Uzziah is buried here, don't move these bones. That's basically what it says. This is a bulla, which is something like a signet, like you would stamp hot wax and stamp a letter, something like this. This is Isaiah's bulla. It was found in Jerusalem, south of the temple, in an area called Ophel. And this is one of those amazing finds. It proves to us that Isaiah was a person that was of some authority, that he wrote stuff and that he stamped it. That's what it proves, and it's Isaiah's name on that. Nevertheless, this is who Isaiah was. He comes on the scene about this time. All right. Now comes a crisis. The Syro-Ephraimite crisis. The nation of Israel continues to feel this pressure from Assyria. Assyria is a large army. They continue to want this land of the Levant, and the reason they want it is because it gives them a pathway to Egypt. Really, other than that, the land doesn't have a lot of value, but it is a highway from going in the Fertile Crescent, following it down into the land of Egypt. Egypt had copper, had a lot of other great resources, agriculture, and they needed a pathway down there, and going across the desert is not practical. So Israel is feeling this pressure from Assyria, and they join forces with another coalition, thinking this is going to be the answer to their prayers. We'll make buddies with Syria. And they decide to attack Judah, and what their plan is, they're going to kick Ahaz out. Ahaz is the king. They're going to kick him out, and they're going to put their own king in, a guy named Talib, to Baal. And that way they have their puppet governor set up over Judah. There'll be three nations. Maybe they can talk a couple of more in, and they can form another coalition to stand against the Assyrians. That's their goal. That's what they hope they can do. Isaiah goes out and finds Ahaz and tells him, hey, this isn't going to amount to anything. It's a burning reed in the wind. It's not going to amount to anything. You can read about this in Isaiah 7. King Ahaz of Judah, does not believe Isaiah. He thinks Isaiah has lost his mind, so he makes a side deal with the government of Assyria to pay them taxes. He calls up Syria, and says, hey, what if I start paying you guys a little tribute and you get Israel and Syria off my back? Well, that worked for the time being. Now, what you may not realize, this is the passage in Isaiah where Isaiah says, a virgin shall conceive and bring forth a child, in Isaiah 7. Isaiah is talking specifically at that time about him and his wife having a baby. And he says, this baby is going to be proof to you. It's a sign that this thing's not going to work, that they're trying to bring against you. But Ahaz did not believe it. Interesting that the world still does not believe this sign that's been given to the world about salvation. Nevertheless, the king of Judah, Ahaz, makes this deal with the king of Assyria to buy protection. He does that, and Assyria protects them, and the thing fails. Well, be careful who you make a deal with. We'll find out in a moment. This is told in the, what's the name of it? The summary inscription 7. There's a bunch of these from Nineveh, of Tilgath-Pilneser III, lists Ahaz of Judah as one of the ones that pays tribute to avoid destruction. And then there's a bulla for Ahaz that was also found in Ophel, which is right south of the Temple Mount, one of those signet things. There's one for Ahaz. You can read about this, Isaiah 7, also in 2 Kings chapter 16, 2 Chronicles chapter 28. This is where biblically this story is told. Now, so Ahaz thinks he's done this great thing. He's paid off Assyria. I've got my protection. These other countries aren't going to bother me. Well, guess what Assyria does next? They conquer Israel. That's what they were paid to do, and that's exactly what they do. Assyria invades Israel, and when they invade Israel, they utterly destroy Israel. There is nothing left. The city of Samaria is leveled. There's nothing there now. It is leveled. They do it in the most brutal way. Shalmaneser V and Sargon II take around 30,000 captives back, and their plan is not to weaken it, not to destroy it. Their plan is to erase it. That's what you read their writings. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to erase Israel from the face of the map. This is very much like Nazi Germany wanting to erase the Jews. That's what this was. He wanted to erase them. So he took these 30,000 captives, killed countless thousands others. A bunch fled down to Hezekiah, who was the king of Judah at the time, and took refuge in the southern kingdom of Judah. And then they transported in people from other countries. When you read the New Testament and you read about the Samaritans, that's who these people are, the people that were transported in there. Nevertheless, Assyria came in and did exactly what Ahaz paid them to do. They destroyed it, and this relief I have here is a game the Assyrian soldiers would play. As they would go through the villages and the towns killing people, they would catch them and throw them up in the air and catch them on their spears, including babies. They would play a game. I'm sorry this is harsh, but this is what they did. They would play a game of ripping open the bellies of women that were with children to see if they could make the baby come out. That's how brutal this invasion was. And it essentially erased Israel from the map. Except for those few that escaped down and went and lived with Hezekiah in the southern country of Judah, Israel ceases to be. That's what Ahaz paid for. He paid to get that done. You can read about that in Isaiah chapter 8, 2 Kings chapter 17, 2 Kings chapter 18, and the Nimrud prison of Sargon II gives a detailed description of this invasion and this battle. Okay, well, guess what's next? That went so well. He decides he's going to go conquer the people that paid the money. Except it's no longer Ahaz in power, now it's Hezekiah. So about 10 years go by, Hezekiah is in power. This is in the 14th year of Hezekiah's reign. And now it is a king named Sennacherib, another king of Assyria. He invades, Israel's gone. And they still need a road to Egypt. And the only thing in their way now is this small city-state of Judah. So there's nothing stopping him. So he goes down there, and first he begins to work his way through what are called the fortified cities. These cities that are out in the countryside have walls around them, and they're fortified, but they're smaller cities. Most famous of those is the city of Lachish. He works through those until he finally conquers all of those. Then he comes and surrounds Jerusalem. Jonathan showed some pictures of the Battle of Helm's Deep last Wednesday night. That's kind of what this is. Matter of fact, I'm not so certain that Tolkien didn't borrow from this imagery to tell and write his stories, because it feels very much that way. This evil force coming in with relentless hate and power, just overwhelming the only good that's left in the earth kind of a story. That's what's happening here. Nevertheless, Sennacherib comes in, works his way through the country, absolutely pillaging these cities. There's a lot of history on Lachish. It's well documented, lots of archaeology on it. Finally, he surrounds Jerusalem. When he surrounds Jerusalem, his spokesperson, a guy named Rabshakeh comes out. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of soldiers surrounding Jerusalem. Rabshakeh comes out and says, you know, your God didn't help Israel very much. We beat them. And your God didn't help the people down at Lachish. They're all dead. And you know what? Rabshakeh says, I'll give you horses and chariots if you can put men in them. We'll just make it fair. I'll give you horses and chariots. And he's speaking in Hebrew. The people are terrified. Hezekiah had issued an order, do not speak up. Be quiet. The city did not say a word. The one spokesman for Hezekiah spoke back and said, hey, you can speak in your native language, we understand. And the guy says, no, I'm going to speak in the Hebrew language because these people on the wall are the ones that are going to have to be eating their own dung and all the bad things that they're going to be doing. So they're the ones that need to hear it. And he comes back with more threats saying, hey, I'll give you the horses and chariots to fight us with if you can put soldiers in them. It's horrible what he says. Well, Isaiah, this is part of Isaiah's prophecy. Isaiah tells Hezekiah, this is going to come to nothing. Okay. My point of the sermon tonight's right here, so let me take a moment to make it. Judah is nobody. They don't have enough people to put on horses and chariots. They have been conquered by everybody and their brother, and they are nobody on the world stage. And every one of their cities has just been burned to the ground, and all that's left is Jerusalem. They are a nobody, and they are now surrounded by 100,000 or more of the most powerful army in the world, and Isaiah is a kook because he says, there's not going to be anything. I mean, that'd be like it's 49-0 with 5 seconds left in the fourth quarter, and we're saying, no, we could win. No, you can't win. You're not going to win this. And Isaiah tells Hezekiah, yeah, this is not going to be a deal. And part of Isaiah tells that. And of course, if you remember what the story Jonathan told last Wednesday night, that night, I love the way the Bible says this. The next morning, they all woke up and they were dead. I don't know how you wake up dead, but the army woke up and a bunch of them were dead. Sennacherib grabs the few people he has left and he goes back to Jerusalem, back to his country of Nineveh, and he writes a thing kind of bragging about what he did, but he does not say that he conquered Jerusalem because he did not conquer Jerusalem. It was during this siege that Hezekiah built one of the most amazing things in Jerusalem, and that's the tunnel system under Jerusalem. Let me show you what I mean. Down at the low end of Jerusalem, on the south tip of Jerusalem, there's a natural spring and a pool called the Pool of Siloam. It's fed by springs, and I haven't been there, but I've been to the Middle East, and I've seen how this works. These springs are fed out of these hills, and it feeds these pools, and it's a natural occurring pool there. They dug a tunnel so that the water could drain out of that pool underground, follow that tunnel back into the city, and they could have a reliable supply of water in the city. Now, what's amazing is they dug it from two ends. One started here, one started there, and they met perfectly in the middle. Their engineering baffles people today that go and look at it and study it, and they're still not sure how they pulled this off. But it was one of the things that Hezekiah did to save his city, is by diverting this water. And there's other things he did too. I want you to get the scene, though. Hezekiah is telling this story. Hezekiah is sitting in a city that's surrounded, in a nation that's on fire, that hadn't won a good battle in a long, long time, that couldn't win a battle if they tried to, on their own at least. And Hezekiah, the bulk of what Hezekiah wrote, he wrote right about this time. Chapter 40 through 66, a lot of that was written right here because he died not long after this. A lot of what he wrote was during time of Ahaz, the first several chapters, and then a lot of what he wrote was here at this time. Okay, get with Isaiah for a second. Isaiah is writing, Judah is going to come back. There will be great, massive highways leading nations coming back to Jerusalem. And it'll be this great city, you heard the text we read tonight, covered with a canopy of God's glory, and all nations will flow into it. Never mind that it's on fire right now. What Hezekiah wrote is the most spectacular prediction you can imagine. This next 30, 33, 34 sessions, if we learn anything, it is to believe in God's promises. Isaiah believed the promises to Abraham. He believed the promises to Moses. He believed the promises to David, and he didn't care that the nation was on fire. When God told him that all nations are going to flow into Jerusalem, he believed it. Now, I'm not sure he understood exactly how that was going to happen, and that'll get unpacked for us these next several months, but he believed it. Even though they're surrounded by armies about to destroy them, Isaiah believed it. It is one of the greatest statements of faith in the Bible, the book that Isaiah wrote. Let's go on. Hezekiah dies. His son Manasseh comes to power. Manasseh turns away from God, and he becomes the most evil of the southern kings there were. He was very engaged in the sacrificial offering of children, burning children alive, just the most horrendous things you can imagine. Manasseh killed all the prophets that were the prophets of Yahweh. He put them all to death. Manasseh reigned for a good long while. He was taken captive by Assyria for a short time, but then allowed to come back. When Manasseh died, his son Josiah came to power. Josiah was more like Hezekiah. He was a godly man. Josiah, they're stumbling through the temple and they find scrolls of the old covenant, and they realize how far off they've gotten from Yahweh. And so Josiah begins this campaign of restoring the worship to Yahweh. And it's an incredible restoration, and probably the greatest restoration in all of Israel's history, what Josiah did. They reestablished the temple. They had the sacrifices, the Passover, and of course they had those immigrants that had come down from the northern kingdoms that they could do all these things. It was a pretty impressive restoration that Josiah brought. Okay. Still, these world powers are brewing up. You got Egypt, you got Assyria, you got Babylon. Assyria has been the power, but it appears that Josiah, and maybe because of his grandfather Hezekiah, had made some kind of a deal with the Babylonians. The Babylonians came to see Hezekiah, and Hezekiah had showed them all the gold in the temple, and it appears there was some sort of maybe not a coalition, but a relationship between Jerusalem and Babylon. Well, as the Babylonian Empire began to grow, the Assyrians realized they're going to have to stand up against the Babylonians. So they call for help from the Egyptians. The Egyptians, Pharaoh Necho, come up the coast to join with the Assyrians so they can have this battle and defeat the Babylonians. On the way up the coast, Josiah gets the bright idea. He's going to dress up so he doesn't look like a king, and he's going to go out there and attack the Egyptians and maybe thwart that. Maybe because he's trying to be friends with Babylon. It's hard to know that. There's a lot of speculation about that. Nevertheless, Josiah goes out there and he gets himself killed. He falls in battle, and let's just be honest about it, this was the end of Judah. When Josiah dies in battle, the kings after this are these puppet kings that are set up. They were just puppet states of the Babylonian government. They really didn't amount to anything. When Josiah dies, so dies the southern country of Judah in terms of being it's a standalone country. Nevertheless, Josiah goes out there and dies, and they bring him back to bury him, and there's an excavation where you can see where that battle took place. Well, finally, the battle takes place. It is the Battle of Carchemish, one of the most important battles in world history. If you wanted to say the 20th century had two world wars and they were World War II and World War III instead of 1 and 2, this would be World War I. This was a world war. Babylon has made friends with the Medes. They've made this alliance with the Mede people, the people out of the hills. Assyria has made their alliance with Egypt, and they come finally into battle at this city of Carchemish on the Orontes River. Babylon doesn't just defeat Assyria, they humiliate Assyria. They piled Assyrian bodies across the river to make a bridge out of it. They absolutely defeated Assyria. Here is how absolute this victory was. Assyria, from that moment forward, was never a nation again. They're not a nation now. The Syria we talk about is not them. That Assyria is gone. Egypt, while Egypt still continues to be a country, it's not what it was. It has not been a world or even regional power since then. That was the end of those two nations. And if you want to read about that, go over to the book of Isaiah and he'll tell you about it. That's what happened. Meanwhile, Babylon now is left as the only world power on the world stage. They've got this alliance with the Medes, and they're very powerful. They've got a highway down to Egypt. They've conquered the Assyrians. They're very powerful. And so guess what they do next? And by the way, there's lots of archaeology to support this. You can read some about this in Jeremiah and, of course, in Kings and Chronicles. Here comes Babylon to destroy Jerusalem. Now, what happened was when Josiah died, Nebuchadnezzar put in a puppet king, one of the people in the lineage of David, and he stayed for a while, and then he rebelled. He stopped paying taxes, then he put in another one, and he stopped paying taxes. He put in another one. There were 3 J's, and finally Zedekiah, and I never can remember the 3 J's. Jehoiachin, Jehoiakim, and another one. There's 3 J's and then Zedekiah. Finally, Nebuchadnezzar had had enough. He had all he could take. He comes and he brings his army to Jerusalem. He surrounds it. He absolutely burns it to the ground. The temple is destroyed, one block of another. Solomon's temple is leveled to the ground. The wall is leveled to the ground. They are still digging up layers of ash from this destruction. It was an absolute destruction. They had been taking captives back, but now at this last destruction, they take a bunch of captives back to Babylon. That's where we read about the captivity, the Babylonian captivity, all the Israelis that are taken back to Babylon, the psalm that reads them singing by the river of Babylon, wanting to go back home. Isaiah tells you this is all going to happen. He tells you of this utter destruction of the temple, yet he describes someday God in his temple. It's the most amazing statement of faith coming from Isaiah. He doesn't know how, but he knows that God is going to be victorious despite this horrible destruction that's taking place. And of course, there's a lot of biblical texts that talk about this. Isaiah talks about it, Jeremiah talks about it, the Chronicles, the Kings talk about it, and there's lots and lots of archaeology that you can read, various chronicles and all that you can read about this destruction. So, Judah now ceases to be a country. It's destroyed, the walls are destroyed, the city is burned, Solomon's temple is destroyed, there's nothing left, and all the people have been hauled back to the nation of Babylon. Isaiah, in one of the most amazing prophecies, in Isaiah chapter 44 and chapter 45, 200-ish years before it happened, told people in his writing, oh, by the way, after 70 years, this guy named Cyrus is going to let him go home. In the past, I've referred to this as prophesying and taking names. He called out the name of a kingdom that didn't even exist and said, that guy, Cyrus, will send these people home. And sure enough, in 539, Cyrus sent the Jewish people back to Jerusalem with the instructions to rebuild the temple. And that would include Ezra, Nehemiah, and you can read about that in Daniel, Ezekiel, some of Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, the books tell about this. And of course the Cyrus cylinders and many other records. Because of all of the wartime activity in the Gulf in the last many years, there are tons and tons of artifacts that haven't even been translated yet. There's a lot of archaeology that supports this history. Okay. This is the timeline of Isaiah. Isaiah right in the middle of this, in a country that is so desperate, they basically amount to nothing. And Isaiah is making these incredible predictions that a child will be born to them that will be the ruler of the world, that nations will flow into their city, that the new heavens and new earth will be launched from the platform of this new Zion. It's spectacular. That's why, and the New Testament is basically written on the backbone of everything Isaiah predicted. Literally every book in the New Testament borrows language from the book of Isaiah. That's why after quite some time now we've debated over, we said, we've got to study Isaiah on Wednesday night. So buckle up. It's going to be tough. It's hard to do. It's going to take a lot of work from the teachers. We're going to need to read. I don't know if we're going to be able to read 2 chapters every night, but we're going to have to do a lot of reading and pay attention because the New Testament is built on the backbone of the book of Isaiah. And this history helps a lot. Next week, Matt's going to help us understand even more so why we need to study this book. Hope you've enjoyed the study this evening. It's been my pleasure to bring it to you. And I managed to do that without going over too much. So, if we can help you this evening in any way, obey the Lord in baptism. If you would like to be one of those nations that flow into Zion, the pathway is open. The highway has been paved. The road into God's kingdom is wide open, and you can come into it. We can help you with that in the waters of baptism tonight. If you'd like to request the prayers of the church, we can assist you in that as well. If you will come forward while we sing the song that's been selected.